Hi again, Mike Minetti here, Director of Mobilization for American Promise. It is good to see you all, even if virtually. It was a lot of fun to see everyone in person a couple weeks ago. It was a really good experience for me. Thanks to everyone who helped plan this thing with me and who attended this event. Here's the outline of today's meeting. We're going to do a quick recap of NCLC and Lobby Day as well. We'll hear a couple stories from some Lobby Day attendees, and Brian Boyle is going to say a few words, our programs director and general counsel, and then we're going to do some next steps, which will be the main part of the call, actually. Marie Henselder-Kimmel will join for that part of it, as writing an LTE about your experience is going to be part of those next steps. And then, of course, we will have open discussion. So if you want to share your stories, lessons, etc. from Lobby Day, if you have questions, that will be the time. So just a quick recap of the event itself for those of you who weren't aware or weren't at the Freedom is Brewing event. It was really successful. On that first night on the Monday, we had over 100 people attend, which was pushing capacity for that venue, actually. And it was just a great time. I enjoyed myself at that event. And I know a lot of others did as well from the feedback we've gotten. And the conference itself was actually sold out. I don't know if everyone was aware of that, but we did hit our capacity for the conference, 175 people. I think we were probably a handful at least over that. And we actually had to turn people away, believe it or not. So I'm pretty sure this is the first year we've ever had to do that. So amazing work to our digital team for getting the word out there for people to know about this event and all the outreach we did, including a lot of outreach to young Americans. And more than half of all attendees were first-time attendees. I think that actually does speak to the young American outreach that we did. So that's pretty exciting. That's very cool to see that. We love having people come and join the campaign who have never done this before. And then, of course, the Lobby Day itself was very successful. We had over 100 meetings with congressional offices. That is a record for American Promise. That's the most meetings we've ever done on a Lobby Day. And we did have a good mix of Republican and Democrat meetings. Brian's going to talk a little bit about that too, as far as follow-up with some of those meetings in just a few here. So very successful event. Thanks everyone for being part of it this year. A couple pictures to share. This is the Freedom is Brewing event. Love the Lady Liberty, Shelby. And a couple more. And then, of course, the conference itself looked great. From an optics perspective, so nice job to the team on that. And then, of course, the Citizen Lobby Day. So this is the group picture. We've done these every year. It's the biggest one I think we've had. So that's a great photo right there. That's probably my favorite one. Although Zachary Weaver here on the left has $1 million smile going on there. So that's a good one too, Zach. Nicely done. And Virginia holding the American flag on the right. This was her very first time attending. And Jeff asked her to carry the American flag and lead the entire thing. So nicely done, Virginia. And then just a couple meetings. Love the one on the left there. That's the Massachusetts team with the thumbs up. And with that said, I'm just going to pause for a few minutes and we're going to hear from just a couple people who had a first-time experience at the Lobby Day. So I was going to go with Alicia first, but I think I'll go with Perry, if you're available, Perry, just because I just found out she's driving and about to park. So let's give her a few more minutes on that. Perry, are you available to share your experience?
I am. Thank you, Mike. Well, first of all, I'm a native Washingtonian, and I born and raised public schools in DC, not Virginia, not Maryland, but in Washington, DC. I moved to Miami, where I am right now, but I have a home in DC and a home in Miami, and I moved down here to be an official Florida resident, so I was part of the Florida team of, well, one person. And I was lucky because I got coupled with Mike, our leader there, Mike Mineta, to go around. And Florida has two Republican senators, Marco Rubio and Rick Scott. They listened to us very politely. I chose to tell my personal story. I told how I was born and raised in Washington. I now live in Florida, just what I've told you. I lived in Washington, but I never before felt compelled to lobby anybody on Capitol Hill. It was like this distant institution because I felt that my voice wouldn't be heard in light of all the dark money, the bad money that flooded representatives and senators' offices. And I went into a lot of the reasons that was true, and I can I have to attribute my spiel in large part to the practice session we had the day before at the hotel. And this particular practice session had us writing for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes a little speech, one for a Republican and one for a Democrat, to concisely point out why we were there and what we wanted and where we wanted the meeting to go. And I thought that was extremely helpful. It kind of coached me up into what I could say in these meetings. To the Republicans, we talked about federalism a little bit. We talked about states' rights. We talked about the fact that the amendment was not compelling anyone to set limits on anything. It was just giving Congress and the states the power to enact legislation. And, I was making the various points. First of all, I have to say that I was with Mike Mineta, and he took the lead, and as you might imagine, he was fabulous. He kind of softened it up for me, and I went second, told my personal story, and as much as I remembered from the coaching up, and I thought it was pretty good. I did it off the top of my head without looking at notes or anything. And I had the attention of these staffers. They were looking at me, they were listening to me, made good eye contact, they were nodding. And I remember in Rubio's office, one of the staffers said, "Well, we have good news for you." And Mike and I looked at each other and said, "What's the good news?" And in fact, Rubio has recently co-sponsored some legislation to limit contributions. Tell me, Mike, if I've got this right, to limit contributions where were referendums, I think.
It was around forward influence. Yeah. I don't know if
Yeah,
Brian
right,
might be able to
exactly.
give exact details,
So
but yeah.
we connected really well with Rubio's staffers. We went next to Rick Scott's person, and he had been there for 9 years, right? So he was a little tougher to crack, but again, Mike did a great job. I told my personal story. We got a photo outside with him. When I went to Wilson's office, I was on my own. She was my representative in Florida, and I had a good one-on-one discussion with her staffer. I thought it was a great experience. I was much more relaxed than I thought I would be, primarily again for this coaching up. I mean, we had to write 3 or 4 times. We had to give it to our partner at this meeting on the day before, and it just helped me frame what I was going to say in front of the staffers the next day. So I just want to say it was one of the hottest days in DC I'd ever been at. I was wearing this suit or sport coat, and I walked 12,000 steps that day, which was good. It's about 10,000 more than any day that week. It was a great experience. I'm very glad I did it. I'll do it again. And my skepticism of passing a constitutional amendment was very, very much alleviated by the experience.
Nice. Well said. Thank you for the kind words, Perry. You were a natural, as I think everyone could probably see. You explained yourself really well. You were amazing actually in those meetings. So that's why I felt comfortable pushing you out of the nest after just 2 meetings. Let Perry go do the third one totally by himself on his own, and I'm sure you did great in that one. So thank you, Perry, for sharing your experience. And now we'll go to Alicia in Oklahoma.
Hello, everyone. I am glad to be here. I'm parked safely in my garage. I hope you can hear me. Can you
Good.
hear me?
Yep, we can hear you perfectly well.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, cool beans. So my first experience with American Promise was in 2016 when Jeff came to Tulsa and he spoke at the University of Tulsa. And his message resonated with me since, and I've been following ever since then. And it's motivated me to be active in community, events and different things that I could do here. And the opportunity came up for me to come to the conference, and it was definitely a mind-blowing experience for me. I'm a single parent of 2 children, 11 years apart, and they somewhat partook in the journey with me. My daughter, who's 15, she was able to understand. I could explain to her what was going on because I know she's the next generation. So I tried to make sure to, inform her of the things and share my experiences. The conference was awesome. The information, it was so, there was so much information and so much knowledge that was shared that had me walk away like, enlightened, on the impacts and the movement that's occurring within each of the states. And kind of like Perry, one of the really impactful parts of the conference was the laser talks. I went to the communications breakout section, and I used that to help craft, my story and what I would say, and just really condense it quite a bit. And so being from, I don't know if I said this, I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I was the only one from Oklahoma. There was another individual, but he wasn't able to come to the lobby day, and I met him at the conference. He's awesome. So that left me doing this, alone, not alone, but only person from Oklahoma. And I had staff from American Promise with me on lobby day. And this is my first time doing anything like this. And so I was a little nervous to go to the meetings. I had 3 meetings, one with the staff for Senator Mullen, and then 2 with the staff for House Reps, Stephanie Bice, and then Kevin Hearn. And so I am really thankful that the staff went with me. I had Jim with me in the first one, Brian in the second one, and Jeff in the last one. And I was also able to share my story, which really dealt with the economics, the impact that money and politics has on that. I just naturally have a lot of people just come talk to me randomly in grocery stores, convenience stores. I mean, wherever people are publicly, and we always talk about these things, the same things. And being a paralegal who works in the intellectual property field, I've also seen the impact that it has on small businesses and medium businesses. And so I was compelled to come and to join because if not me, then who? Like I could talk about this all day, every day, but I had to actually be active in doing it. And so when it came to lobby day, I shared the story. I shared my experiences, and it was perfectly balanced with each of the staffers, and they were able to go more in depth about the specifics in regards to the statistics and also the movement in the different states, and the desire for Oklahoma legislator to be a part of this conversation, to be a part of this movement, and to get Oklahoma on board. One of the House reps, Stephanie Bice, actually is co-signing on legislation that's going to deal with foreign money in Oklahoma politics. And so the message the message with that staffer, I would say, was really different from the other two. And he specifically pointed out himself, he was like, they are focused on addressing the issue that, constituents don't trust the government. And he said it out of his mouth. And I was like, yes, open door. Thank you, And so it opened the conversation up a little bit more, and we were able to position the 4R amendment and, American Promises stance on money in politics as a resolution to help, close that gap of trust. And so it was really awesome. By the time I got to the third one, I was a little bit more confident. I had my story streamlined a lot more, and I knew how to put it together. And I just recently followed up this week with sending thank you emails to each of the staff members. It took me a while to craft that because I wanted to be more in depth, in a way that I'm not able to articulate in speech. So I was able to do that. I look forward to hearing from them. And I've also joined the writing team. So I look forward to getting involved with that. And I'm just excited about the direction of things and hopeful that Oklahoma will be one of the next states to join the movement. And I'm going to do whatever I can, to help make that happen. So, yeah, that's my experience.
Well, thank you, Alicia. That was awesome. Well said. You're a really good example of one person making a huge difference, right? We say that a lot, but the fact that you came opened those doors to those districts and those meetings that were actually very key meetings, which is why you were in meetings with Jeff and Brian and Jim, because you were there. That's why. That's the only reason we were able to get them, because you were a constituent. So really, really important that each and every person that comes to these events. So thank you. Now I'm going to pass it over to our programs director and general counsel, Brian Boyle, to say a few words before we get to the main part, which is the training we mentioned earlier. Brian, take it
Awesome.
away.
Thanks, Mike. Wow, that was so awesome. I have to say, I had the privilege of getting to be in a meeting with both Alicia and Perry. Mind-blowing that it was their first lobby day, because they were just such superstars. And again, just emphasizing what Alicia said, if not me, then who? Every American needs to realize that they actually have this power. Like, you can get in the door and you can tell your representative how you feel about this, and it matters. So first, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who was there. It was an incredibly impactful lobby day for us, and we are already seeing so many of the after effects of all the efforts that you put in. So I just wanted to talk about just a couple of things about specifically the momentum that we're seeing coming out of lobby day. So I don't think it comes as a surprise to everyone, because we say it all the time, that one of our key strategic challenges is to recruit support from Republicans to introduce their own version of an amendment addressing money in politics. And over the past, roughly year or so, we really are starting to see a sea change, particularly what I'll call the populist wing of the Republican Party, in thinking about the power of money in our electoral system. There are members of the Republican Party who are hearing more and more from their constituents, feeling like they are no longer being able to self-govern. They're being governed by out-of-state corporations or big forces that aren't connected to their community. So that is a dynamic that is continuing to increase. And by having constituents come and get us into those meetings with staffers, we're able to take that public sentiment and then start to marry it with some of the legal arguments around our specific language. And those conversations are proving to be incredibly productive. So I'll just give you one quick highlight and tell you that we actually are in the middle of creating a resource that we're going to share with folks. But the week after we were all in DC, I was back again, and it was like scorching heat at a day-long conference sponsored by the Federalist Society, which I think a lot of you know is a leading conservative legal organization. And the first two panels, the first one was all about like, did James Madison think corporations were people too? And the second one was the challenge of Citizens United. And like, whereas a week before we had constituents saying, we feel like our ability to self-govern is being threatened. The next week I was hearing from legal staff saying, we have doubts about whether the Supreme Court got it right in Citizens United as a matter of like original interpretation of the Constitution. So we're already starting to connect with those staffers again and share more detailed information. And it really is moving the needle. So one of the things that we're doing is we're splicing some of the clips because the videos from that conference were made available. We're putting together some of the key clips so that we can share them with you all. And that actually may be helpful in some of your talking points with legislators. I'll wrap up because I know we're going to hear some great tips from Marie and Mike, but I did just want to say, I really would encourage all of you to consider some specific actions that you can take back home over the next couple of months, because again, when they hear from constituents back in district and they're hearing the same message reinforced, and if you can bring friends along and recruit them to the movement, like this is how we're going to get this done. So just thank you again. It really makes a huge difference. And it also just, it really inspires those of us on staff too. Like you give us such a huge boost of energy when sometimes it's like, oh my God, there's so much going on. And then we see you folks and we hear your voices and your authentic stories, and it's really inspiring. So thank you. Oh, and one last thing. If you happen to be waiting to hear from either me or Jim on any like outstanding emails, please ping us. I'm just going to confess, like the number of emails we've gotten in the past week is so crazy. So if you want to just like remind us to boost yourself to the top of our inbox, I'd really be grateful for that. But I'm sorry if we've been slow to respond. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. Now I'm going to share my screen again. And now, as far as next steps, right, the most important thing, we've got to keep this momentum going forward. So one thing we would love everyone to do is send personal American Promise branded thank you cards. As far as finding the address for those thank you cards, I would just encourage you to just look up their office. It's the easiest way to do it. Whoever you met with, it'll pop right up. Just make sure to put DC office, because that's where you met with them, and that's where likely the staff is that you met with as well. So I would encourage you to send it to the same office that you met with. And right at the top of that document, you'll notice one of them says example of a thank you card. So you can feel free to take a look at that. It's very simple. We don't want to get into too much details about the meeting, or really any details about the meeting. We just want to really thank them for their time. That's the essence of the thank you card. And for anybody who thinks, well, I've already sent them an email, do I need to send them a card? Well, I would just encourage you to think about advertising, right? Because that's in some ways what this is. And the number one rule, as we all know, is repetitiveness, right? A lot of these offices are not familiar with American Promise, so we want them to get that way. So if you send electronic communication last week or this week, and then you send a follow-up in a couple of weeks by mail, it's all good, right? That's going to just remind them and put us in a higher regard. So don't worry about sending too much communication with these offices. And then, of course, write an LTE, which a letter to the editor, which Maria is going to talk to you all about in just a minute here. And then we want to encourage you to set up meetings with candidates and local officials, attend town halls and other local events. And with regard to that, we are actually going to be offering another training coming up in July, probably towards the end of July. So stay tuned on that as another follow-up to this. And then, of course, tabling at summer fairs and local events to do community outreach. That's a big part of what we do. If you're willing to do that, put that into the survey. So the very top link on the resource document is a brief survey of just the things that you're willing to do as a next step, right? So I'm actually going to pause just for a minute here and let everyone open that link and take a minute to just fill it out. Thank you cards, again, just keep it simple, keep it positive. There's not that much space, right? They're small thank you cards anyway. Don't get into the details of the meeting, and just really make sure to thank them for the time. That's the main thing we want to thank them for in those. And then, Marie, I will kick it over to you. If anyone doesn't know, Marie Henselder Kimmel runs the writing team. I actually gave her a Citizen Leadership Award at the conference for that. She does an absolutely amazing job. It's a monthly call. I encourage everybody to sign up for that if you're interested at all in learning more about how to write for American Promise. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Marie.
Thanks, Mike. And so it's the third Tuesday of every month. And Alicia, as she mentioned, did join us this past week. And Alicia had done a great job reading out at the laser talk points. And that's what actually Perry was referring to also, the session on writing up your own little laser talk. And I wanted to ask you, Mike, did everybody that attended the conference got that? But has that been shared with the other volunteers? Do you know?
I
haven't seen
don't, but that would probably be a digital team question. I don't know if anyone from the digital
Okay,
team is
so
on
we'll
here.
follow up
Joanne.
on that. I shared it with the writing team members on my writing resource document, but if we can get that shared with everyone is really, really helpful. I think for speaking to writing letters to the editor for sure, speaking to congressional members, just, you know, talking about the whole everything about the For Our Freedom Amendment. So
Sure.
just a very brief overview here. When you're writing a letter to the editor, no matter what you're writing about, you want to first Google the phrase submission criteria for letter to the editor and the paper you're interested in. Because one of my papers locally here has a 150 word count, which is very challenging when you're trying to explain an amendment and what we need to do, but it can be done. And some of them have 300 word count limits. So you want to know what what you have to aim for. You know, just if you were ever on X, formerly Twitter, you know, you had a certain number of characters. So Google that first. You want to construct a good argument. It's a very short argument, but a good argument. If you're writing in response to an article or an op-ed, you want to mention what the article is or op-ed. And you want to talk about it from your unique perspective. Alicia shared with us that she's a paralegal. I'm a retired OBGYN. We may have teachers, we have students, we have, you know, people from all walks of life that are joining us in this fight for this amendment. And you have a special perspective on the money in politics, what you may have seen in your family, what you may have seen in your workplace, what you see in your hobbies. Use that perspective because that hooks readers when they're reading your letter to the editor. Describe the For Our Freedom Amendment as the solution to the problem where there's outside influence taking over the discussion and the political playing field, and it makes it an unbalanced, out of sorts, out of kilter playing field for us as citizens and for small businesses, and we know all of the problems that it generates. So describe that For Our Freedom Amendment as a solution to that by allowing states and Congress to create reasonable limits on political spending. And then you always want to end with a call to action. Don't just make the point, also invite the reader to do whatever we're doing at the time. Invite them to let their congresspeople know or their local elected officials know that we're working on a local resolution, or we're working on getting candidate pledges signed, or we're working on increasing congressional support for the For Our Freedom Amendment. And that'll be a little bit guided by what's going on in the current meetings that we're holding on a national basis and what events may be going on. And then don't be afraid to name the in fact, you should name the elected official because their staff is going to survey that. So now about the lobby meetings, write about your experience in a positive way and you can start out right off the bat. This doesn't have to be in relation to an article, although it can, because now we're getting all these reports about the amounts of money. We're at a quarterly fundraising report time. You can just say, I attended the American Promise National Citizen Leadership Conference and had an amazing experience meeting with my congressional members to talk to them about my concerns about the overwhelming money in politics. Say why you personally, you know, what was your personal reason for attending? Describe American Promise's mission. Back to the NCLC resource guide, if you go to that talking points link, there's some really good succinct information on that resource that Mike's already linked to that resource page. Don't mention, particularly if the elected official or the staffer that you met with was supportive or not. What you're trying to do is build a relationship. So just saying, thank you for your time and attention. If they happen to be a supporter, you could mention it, but if they're not really receptive or you're having a struggle to get across to them, don't particularly mention that. Just say thank you for your time and your attention, and I hope other elected officials pay attention too. And our call to action, link to the American Promise website. You can't put a hyperlink, but what you can do is just write out www.americanpromise.net. Some papers will actually put a hyperlink, some won't. And I particularly encourage you to ask the reader to also contact their elected officials, join us and contact their elected officials to voice their support for the amendment. Ken put a question in, is the $25 million primary in New York a good news hook? If you're in New York or New Jersey, locally to that, where it's in the news, it's a great hook, but you can say, already we're seeing primary elections for Congress exceed records beyond belief. You can make that kind of an argument. So this happens to be the draft that I wrote. I had a very encouraging experience in Washington, D.C. this month as a citizen asking my New Jersey congressional members to help fix our U.S. political dysfunction. Repeated polls show a supermajority of Americans agree the flood of money in our elections is a threat to our right to self-govern, and 76% agree an amendment is needed to fix it. I joined other citizen volunteers with the cross-partisan nationwide group American Promise as we visited our representatives to ask for support of the For Our Freedom Amendment resolution. It will return the power to reasonably limit political spending back to the states and Congress so that the American people can control the political conversation without domination by huge spending of wealthy donors, special interest groups, and even foreign entities. I thank the staff of Senator Booker and Representative Van Drew for their time and attention to our concerns and presentation of the amendment resolution. After all, if we the people want to resolve our broken politics, we must work together to voice our concerns to get a change we support. Add your voice to ours and tell your congressional members to support the For Our Freedom Amendment. More information at www.americanpromise.net. That's 200 words.
Great. Thank you, Marie. And that's going to be probably the average, right? The longer word count from your experience probably is not going to be realistic in a lot of cases, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we gave you that one, the longer word count example, just for reference if you want to take from it. But Marie's example here is going to be more realistic. So thanks, Marie. And can you just talk a little bit about, I would imagine that a lot of people, one of the main questions is, how do you find the right outlet, right? And approach them, right? Is it better to try to respond to an article? Can you approach an outlet kind of cold? Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? Because I know that's going to be.
Yes, I mean, if you're familiar, if it's the paper that you're familiar with, that you regularly read, and you're going to be targeting your representative in your district, I think that tends to be a good target if they accept letters to the editor. Some media sources don't anymore, but if they do, you can kind of, if you don't usually read the letters to the editor section, and read through it and see, is it that most letters are linked to something that they've covered, or are there just spontaneous, because this is a spontaneous saying, hey, we have dysfunction and this is something we can do about it, and you can get involved too. But if you need to link it to some kind of an article, look particularly for articles on the front page of the paper and op-eds, especially whether it be by a guest op-ed writer or a columnist who regularly writes opinion pieces. Those are the most highly targeted. When there's letters to the editor about those particular pieces, you have your best chance of being published. Also, a little trick is submit your letter to the editor in the morning. I tend to be an evening writer, so I'll write at night and then I'll set my alarm and I'll send it at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. because you walk into your workplace, you look at you open your email box, and that's where you mostly submit these, by email or through a form that the website has, and you look at what's at the top of the list. So you have a better attention of getting the editor's eye if you submit it in the morning. And also, if you link to an article or an op-ed, submit it within 2 to 3 days of, at the most. You can submit up to 5 days, but best 2 to 3 days from the actual article. Those are the kind of the key things right now. And particularly though, use your congressional member's name in there. Whoever you met with, use the name because they'll pay attention to that. And then after it gets published, take it and email it to the staffer and get their attention again.
Nice. Perfect. Thank you, Marie. That was really helpful. Patty, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just had a substantive issue. And if this isn't the right place to talk about it, let me know. But I noticed that a lot of the flood of money issue is in some cases, like with Bernie Sanders, there's lots and lots and lots of small donors. So I would just say, like, and overall this letter is great, but when I hear the flood of money, I would rather hear large donations from wealthy individuals and foreign donors, or something to really specify. We're not just talking about AOC can get 20,000 people to give her $10, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about wealthy donors that can get away either through giving it to a PAC or undisclosed dark money, or, you know, in our state, you know, somebody could give somebody $100,000 2 days before the election, and as long as it was put into the reporting, it's legal. So that's what I just would.
So I did use, I'm sorry, Patty. I did use the terminology wealthy donors, special interest groups, and foreign entities. When you have a 200-word limit, you can't really parse all the little details every single time and still get your message across. So you have to work those things out. Most people, I think, understand money. The problem of money in politics isn't that 1,000 people gave $10. It's that one person gave $10,000 or $1 million or 10 million. And I think most people, when you talk to them about money in politics, they understand that it's the big donors we're talking about and how that really, you know, ramps up. But I agree with you. When you have the space, if you want to go into that, go for it.
Editor. And otherwise, I thought it was perfect, except for that one little phrase. Great job, makes the point. We should all copy most of it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Marie. That's great stuff. Brian, can you do just a quick 1-2 minute overview of how to find the polling data? Because that is something we mentioned in here.
We wanted everybody to be aware of where you can find the state-specific polling data for your state. Now, one thing is that we don't actually have polling data for the states that have already passed resolutions for the amendment, but it is for the 29 or 28 that haven't yet. So I'll just show you where to find that. If you go to our homepage and then go to where it says Our Plan, this is sort of where we get into this 50-state plan and all that. And you scroll down and here's a map. This map will bring you to a page to every single state. And right now for 29 of those states, let's use South Dakota. No, let's use North Dakota. Click on North Dakota, it brings you to the North Dakota page. And the first thing up there is our national polling about constitutional amendment support. And you can click on it to see Republican, Democrat, Independent, and other. But if you're writing, if you are writing an email to a legislator, it's always great to be able to include the hyperlink, and it's typically americanpromise.net state and then the state. So that's how you navigate. I'll go back again to that map and you can see, let's go to Texas. Brings you to Texas, and then the first thing up there is our polling results. So we just wanted you to be aware of that resource.
Perfect. Thanks, Brian. Let's go to some questions. Alan, do we have any questions at the top that we should take right off here?
Everything's kind of, worked itself out, so nothing yet.
Great. Okay. Well, how about stories then? Who wants to share stories, questions, comments from your experience?
I guess I got one. We were surprised to, I'm Hank Mayers, I'm from Michigan. We had our 2 senators and two congresspersons. One of them was Congresswoman Rashid Talib. We were to see her staff, and I don't know what motivated her, but she opened her door and said, "Come on in, let's do it in here." And so we had a really interesting conversation with the representative herself. She is very conversant on the problem. She is particularly concerned and incredibly schooled on the games of dark money, and wanted to have further conversations, and I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen. So that was a fun surprise.
Nice. Thank you, Hank. Vicky?
In responding to the people we met with, I would like to remind them about the American Bar Association survey. And I was wondering if we could have a copy of that letter again to just include with it. And then also, is there a one-pager? I can't seem to find just a one-pager on the 4-Hour Freedom Amendment without having to link it to the website. Are attachments not something that they want to open, or is there a reason behind not having that for us to follow up with?
Good question. I believe there is actually a one-pager on the 4-Hour Freedom Amendment. I can get that to you as a follow-up, Vicky, for sure.
And we also did, we had Word versions of the ABA letters too, so we can, if you didn't get that, you.
Oh, yeah, and those
we
actually
have-
are also linked in that resource document if you scroll down now.
Oh, are they? Oh,
Yep.
cool.
All right, Laura.
Okay, hi. Lauren Meyer from California. I wanted to share that we had one of our Senate meetings is Alex Padilla, and this in-person meeting with staff was the third time we've met with this group of people. They are super enthusiastic about getting an amendment done. You know, they're aware there have been, 12, 15 versions. Alex Padilla hasn't been our senator in California for that long, but he's really tracking on this, and they really want to know. They want to be kept up to date on our progress as things go by. Part of our conversation, though, what I really wanted to share with you guys is that I was asked at one point, what's the difference between the 4-Hour Freedom Amendment and all the prior, the prior versions? Why is it better? And so I made a few points about that because I've lived with these long enough, and I couldn't be specific about, let's say, just the one previous version because there've been so many. But part of that conversation was their agreement. Anna Noon is actually the lead in the judiciary staff in that Senate office, and another legislative staffer. So what they told us was that they had met with several groups on this topic, and they really agreed that the 4-Hour Freedom Amendment language is much stronger, that they thought that legally it was a really good thing to do. And they just couldn't say enough about American public. They were saying, we're doing everything we should be doing. And we're doing way more than other groups that are working on this. I mean, even though there used to be like 50 organizations, 8 years ago, there was a lot of collaboration, and it's really boiled down to us to take it over the finish line. So they just couldn't have been more complimentary about what we're doing and encouraging that we should just keep going.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Laura. That's great feedback. And let's go to Justin.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, make a couple comments on the lobby day. One of the things seems like it might be helpful for future lobby day meetings would be if there are like large state groups having a dedicated contact for anybody, especially if they haven't done this before. Because I wound up missing both of my first two meetings due to, well, first of all, miscommunication about ID requirements. Like at the previous call, I had checked if I needed an up-to-date license to be able to attend a meeting, which I was told that wouldn't be required. But when we were actually heading to the meetings, I was then told by somebody else that no, I actually do need an up-to-date ID, and so I attempted to potentially go back to my car where I had my passport, but then I talked to somebody else at the office again, and they told me like, no, you don't actually need an ID. But by that point, I had already missed the meeting. And then, for the second meeting, the group just kind of left without me. And, I tried calling somebody from that was a lead on some of the meetings that I was supposed to be going to, but I couldn't get in touch. And so I wound up just walking back to the hotel.
Oh, man. Well, first of all, sorry you had that experience, Justin. Geez. Yeah, I don't know where the information came from because to my knowledge, that just isn't required. I don't think anybody had that experience where they had to show an ID. I certainly didn't, and I don't know anyone that did. So unfortunate incident, information. So sorry about that. Did you know that we did have a contact on that resource document? Because that would be my suggestion for next time would be you could, in this case, potentially have called Liz, who was the first contact on that document, and then she could have gone through a list of resources to probably connect you right with the right people if the members of your team were not answering their phone for whatever reason. So I'm just curious if you knew about that or if you tried that, Justin.
Well, I tried calling one of the people that was supposed to be going to both of the meetings that I had, and I had actually seen her at the office before the second meeting because people came back for lunch. And I'm from Pennsylvania, so I was part of a large group, so I can understand like how it might have happened where you're not like kind of keeping track of everybody. But that's just why I think that having a dedicated point person that everybody knows who their point person is and has and is available to contact would be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great advice. Thank you. We'll definitely write that down for next time.
Could I add one comment? Justin, the fact that you've come to this call after experiencing that, I want to thank you for hanging in there. Hang in there, fella. It's going to go right the second time for sure. We're glad to have you.
Yeah, come back.
I've been on and off with you guys for like 10 years now, so I'm in it for the long haul.
Good.
Nice. Awesome, Justin. Thank you for having that attitude too. We appreciate it. Marie, I know we're just about out of time, but Marie, you can close us out here.
Yeah, I did drop this in the chat, but I just want to voice it. I had a long discussion with Jim Dornan at lunch on lobby day, and he was talking about how he had a thought of providing sort of a blurb that we could send out periodically to the staffers that we're in touch with for the various congressional members. And I was wondering if there was more thought given to that, and is it a plan? I think it kind of addresses Laura's questions too, because I also had basically all of the Democratic staffers say, we really want to keep up to date on this. Please send us the information. So that would be very helpful.
Yeah, even at times we've had opportunities to connect staffers between offices because they know we're meeting the other senator, we're meeting, in the Bay Area, it could be 10 different people that you might be meeting with if you're doing it on Zoom, for example. So they want to know, what's happening to stay up to date.
Brian, did you want to chime in on that?
Actually, I was going to invite Marie and Laura or anybody else to shoot me an email to describe some of the specifics of what they might think would be helpful. Because I can tell you one of the things we have been talking about recently is sort of tweaking the way that we package and describe our bi-weekly campaign finance roundup updates. I think historically we tried to make them a little bit lighthearted and have like a little bit of an edgy voice, but we might go more middle of the road so that those could be things that if you just wanted to be like, hey, check this out, you could forward it along. And then in terms of like more specific insidery information, that we just have to be much more strategic about, and it wouldn't be just like a monthly thing. So please feel free to send me email with some of ideas of the specific types of things you would like to be able to provide, and then Jim and I can connect on that. Thank you.
I have one question on a follow-up idea. One of the things that Brian and I want to do is to later this week, probably tomorrow, probably, is to call back on the people we met and to just remind them, gentle reminder that we're hoping the ABA letter could go out before the end of this month. I believe we were told that was kind of important, but the thing I'm thinking about is it's easy enough for them to lose track of that ask. And so I think calling them back at some point that we think is still within the window and so forth, to make sure that those letters don't, that ask doesn't get lost.
Yeah, great point, Hank. And Brian, do you want to talk about the timeline just briefly before we wrap it up here? When is that report due out? Because we were trying to put urgency into it in our initial instructions, so.
Yeah,
Is there
so
a date?
the ABA is planning to finalize and issue the report in August. And I would say, just in general, if you're prioritizing follow-up with different members of Congress, I'd say pushing on the ABA letter is probably more worthwhile with Democrats, just because it's less of a, I think it requires a little bit less like to get them there. So if you're following up with Republican offices, I would focus on sticking to the 4R Freedom Amendment and building the relationship around that. But yeah, so the timeline is try to get it out certainly by beginning of July, so that they would have a couple weeks to figure out whether they wanted to send something.
Okay, so making the call this week would probably be a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and as a reminder, in the survey, which you all will get tonight, by the way, I'm going to take care of this right after here, so look for it soon. One of the questions is, do you need any help with follow-up at all? So just put whatever, if you're waiting on something, if you need a resource, make sure to put it into that form. That'll make it much easier for us to go through it all and say, hey, this person needs this follow-up, or they're waiting for Brian or Jim's input on this meeting. And coordinate with your teams too on the follow-up. We are definitely relying on you guys to coordinate as teams and be strategic about that. Some of you have Brian and Jim included on your response because they requested to be a part of that follow-up strategy. Otherwise, you're encouraged to strategize as a team on the best way to follow up. Okay, well, we're past time. I could stay on here for hours and just listen to all the stories from everyone, but unfortunately, we are out of time for tonight. But look for the follow-up, and let's keep this conversation going together as a team, because we've done a really good job of moving the needle even further than it was over the last couple of weeks with these meetings. So let's keep it going in all the states. So look for follow-up and look for another training call at the end of July, as I said, about meeting, setting up meetings in your district and going to town halls and that kind of stuff this summer. So look for that. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.